Hey, what's up, guys? It's Rico here, CEO of SourceFind Asia, host of the Main Channel podcast, and the host of the SourceFind Asia YouTube channel, of course. Back with another one. Got the lovely city skyline in the background. This angle is probably not the best for lighting, but I just really wanted to get the skyline in the background. If I went full skyline, I'd just be like a shadow. But yeah, in this video, I wanted to talk about 2020 sourcing and beyond during these COVID times. The fundamentals are still the same. But there are some things that you have to look out for, and we've had some major situations happen this year with regards to shipping and just the geopolitical climate between the US and China. So that's what this video is about. I think I previously mentioned in the video that I did when I was in Jakarta, and I was talking about how COVID has affected my business. I'm not a politician. I'm not an expert when it comes to politics. I can only talk about the business side of things and how that's affecting how we work and how our clients work. So that's just full disclaimer here. So I mean, the first thing is obviously with COVID, what's changed is a lot of people are having to deal with their factories remotely. I'm sure there's a lot of people, maybe people that are watching this video right now, a lot of businesses that were accustomed to frequently going to China, like as in, every 3 months or every quarter, whatever, going twice a year to go touch base with their factories, to go to the Canton Fair, global sources. There's very much an aspect of like normal to frequently be going to China, or like people like myself who lived there, other business owners who maybe lived in China for half of the year, or 3-4 months out of the year. So obviously that's changed. Like most people have left, most people have gone back to their home countries. If you're like me, I moved to the Philippines. I mean, I still have my office in China, my team in China, so my presence is still very much there, almost like I never left, but I'm not physically there. So I can imagine that for other people who don't have offices, other people who don't have staff in mainland China, it might be quite difficult and a little bit scary actually to be managing their businesses remotely. So I think what's happening right now is that people are having to adapt a lot more to the online workspace. It was interesting talking to my employees because we started to implement remote work in the middle of 2019 because I was traveling more, and I realized that it was going to be more beneficial for my team if they were able to work from where they wanted to work. So we actually started to implement remote systems around that time period. So this whole COVID thing was not really like having to work from home and offices being shut down was not really like a big change for us. But I was talking to one of my staff, and she was saying how a lot of her friends who were used to going to offices every day found it weird to work from home, got used to working from home, and then when things went back to normal in China to a certain extent, they had to go back to the offices, and it was kind of like a jarring experience for a lot of people. So it's not just foreign buyers, but it's also the factories and the office staff that have also had to get used to this new work situation. So from a factory's perspective, production capacities are still not at 100%. I don't think they will be until there's basically a cure. I think a lot of the factories shifted their focus from whatever products they're working on to PPE. That's obviously changed and slowed down now. The office staff had to figure out ways to communicate with their clients better from an online perspective and online workflow. There's just more cautiousness about taking on new projects as well, because a lot of factories lost a lot of money. A lot of factories have limited staff, so they don't necessarily want to take on smaller projects as much as they're not as willing to take on smaller projects as they were before. So I think it's just right now it's a situation where it takes longer to find the right suppliers. It takes longer to get your productions done. It takes longer to communicate your requirements to factories because of, like I said, they don't have as much capacity, they don't have as much staff as they used to. The fundamentals, and I'm not going to talk about the fundamentals because I've talked about them in so many other videos you can check out, like how to find the most qualified factory, 5 do's and don'ts when sourcing a supplier, when it's time to find a sourcing agent. That brings me to my next point, is I think a lot of the companies that didn't have infrastructure in China and were used to dealing with the stuff themselves are having to lean more on service providers like my company, like some of the QC companies that we work with, like the sourcing and logistics companies, because they just can't physically go there themselves. Maybe for some people, when they were doing their big productions, they would send their team over to help with inspections. Now they really have to focus on working with good partners. And something I've always talked about before is like having good partners in China is like invaluable, right? I can only imagine if we hadn't built the relationships that we've built over the years, how difficult this year would have been for us with some of the productions that we had. So just to give you some examples, this goes now into the geopolitics between the US and China. We had so many issues exporting products during the height of COVID, and specifically, PPE and medical products. But in general, the shipping to the US from China has been off. A few examples. With the PPE stuff, a lot of the products that, I would say 80% of the products that were listed as medical products were being stopped at the Chinese border and also being stopped at the US border. And there was no clear definition or timeline as to how long that stuff was going to take to clear customs. The rules of what was required in terms of documentation and all that stuff was changing every day, every couple of days. And then just the sheer volume, because commercial flights are down, if you're shipping by air, the sheer volume of stuff being shipped through like a FedEx, UPS, and DHL was so high that a lot of the stuff was just taking a long time to ship. We had shipments that took, first of all, 2-3 weeks to leave China, and then took 1 to 2 weeks to clear customs in the US and be shipped to the client. So obviously that creates a lot of headaches, and all of this stuff was out of our control. Like, we provided all the right documentation. Our products were being sourced from legitimate factories. Stuff that I talked about during COVID, the rules for certain products like the masks, the CDC was constantly changing what was an acceptable mask and wasn't an acceptable mask overnight, like without any warning. In my opinion, that was more political than it was about protecting people. Because I can tell you right now, a 3-ply mask, this mask is not the right mask to protect you from COVID. The right masks are the N95s, the K95s. Those are just limited supply, or they were coming from China and they were being blocked. From a logistical standpoint, I think you have to be aware of this when you're shipping out products from China to the US, especially if it's something that could be deemed medical. Even if you're not claiming it's medical, there is a chance that you get the goods randomly, not seized, but randomly stopped by US customs. I think Chinese customs has relaxed a little bit now, but US customs is still pretty strict, and sometimes they just get stuck for a couple of weeks, and in the end you have to pay some import tariff, and then it clears. Big part of this is our partners were able to navigate some of these things and negate some of these issues. But even with the experience of our partners and our partners helping us out, it was still very difficult. So you have to really keep these things in mind. How is this going to affect things moving forward? It's tough to even answer that question, because I really think it depends on what happens with the US election. I think a trade war between China is very much dependent on what's going to happen with these things. If the US relaxes, or if China relaxes, all of these things change the battle. It becomes easier to export goods. One positive thing I would say is that it is easier now than it was 4 or 5 months ago. So that's something, a little bit of silver lining when it comes to that. And some other things to keep in mind, I remember before this whole COVID and before the geopolitical situation, US customs was not relaxed, but they were a little bit more flexible. So like if your documentation wasn't 100% correct, it wasn't really a big issue. You might have to change it, or you might have to pay like a little extra fine or something like that, but it was very minimal. And it was very rare that those kind of things happened. Now I notice that if you have, very like a very minimal mistake in the description or the cost of the good or whatever, you are more likely to get flagged, and you are more likely to have your goods be waiting in a warehouse for weeks while your case gets resolved. Yeah, it's definitely different. But yeah, I think these things you have to just keep in mind moving forward, and just constantly be paying attention to, constantly be talking to the partners that you have, if you have partners in China, asking them, how easy or how difficult it is to ship to the US right now. And then also just constantly be paying attention to what's going on with the news, and see if there's any new, tariffs going to happen and things like that. If you know who to talk to, there are ways that you can get your taxes a little bit lower depending on the product if you use the right HS codes. A lot of people don't know what an HS code is. HS code is basically the code that identifies the product category and type of product it is, which identifies how much you have to pay in taxes. So the best person to talk to about that is your shipping agent. Ask your shipping agent, hey, is there a different HS code for this product that would allow me to pay a lower import tariff? Some of the things to keep in mind. Also, shipping in lower quantities. I guess it depends on how much volume you're doing to the US, but if you can figure out another way of, let's say, having goods stored in a warehouse in China or in Hong Kong and then shipping smaller quantities as you need them, that might also be more beneficial for you in terms of getting the products into the country. And then shipping by sea shipments seem to still be relatively smooth in comparison to air shipments. Once the commercial flights start to open up again more, that should increase the frequency and speed of air shipments as well. So something to keep in mind in 2021. This is the first time I'm going to mention this, but I will be putting together a course about this. Basically, the general sourcing practices. I'm going to probably have to sign off soon. I think the storms are coming. Basically, best sourcing practices from sourcing the product all the way to production management. And then I'll also be putting together a sort of digital summit with experts in e-commerce, in design for manufacturing, in shipping, in manufacturing. And that should be coming soon, probably before the end of the year. Fingers crossed if we get all our ducks aligned. So look out for that. All right, guys, like this kind of content, like, comment, share, subscribe. I hope the sound has been okay. It got super windy towards the end, and I'll see you guys next week.